Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. Glad to have everyone join us. Hope that as you join us, that you'll let us know where you're joining from. And as always, love to hear your questions and comments and enjoy that dialogue with everyone. That helps make the show even better. As always, when we start off the podcast, I like to explain what we see as wisdom. We see wisdom as a journey, and it has three basic parts or steps to it, and starts with knowledge. And that's something that we can all do, is pick up knowledge formally, informally. Hopefully, we're always open to learning and looking for opportunity to learn. And then, but contrary to some popular belief that knowledge is our power, the reality is that knowledge is just the foundation, just the start. And the next step in this process is to gain understanding. And understanding is when we begin to take the knowledge we find and begin to do something with it. We apply it, we use it, we gain experience with it, and continue moving forward, and it becomes part of who we are. And then the third, and what I think is the most important step, is when we step into wisdom. And wisdom is to take our knowledge and understanding and actually see it in a much larger perspective. Of course, wisdom, we need to be able to see how it affects us internally and externally, because it will affect both. The bigger thing, though, is to also see how what we do, what we say, the choices we make affect others. Those that are around us, and anymore with social media and all, even a larger world effect. So for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, we like to say it as we begin to see the world through God's eyes. And wisdom is something we should seek to gain on a regular basis, because it makes such a difference for us when we gain wisdom and apply it in our lives. So it is a great honor to have back as a guest my good friend and colleague, Gary Frey. And so I'm going to bring Gary on. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Kevin. And you are a friend because you know how to pronounce my last name. I always know if it's a telemarketer because Frey.
Imagine you get quite a variety of approaches there.
Yeah.
So Gary has been on a prior episode, had a great time. And in fact, part of the reason I invited Gary back is we just, by the time we got to the end, we still had a lot that we could talk about. And so Gary, introduce yourself to everyone for those that don't know, and then we'll launch into things.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us bright and early this morning. And for anybody that's on the West Coast, it's really bright and early. And if you're in Hawaii, I don't know what in the world you're doing because 6-hour time frame is like wrong. So anyway, thank you for joining us.
Very good. Well, let's welcome Johan from Cape Town.
Johan!
Good friend Cape also. Town. Yeah, Jeremy Rudis. Glad to have you, Jeremy, and look forward to hearing from you guys and others that join us. And so, Gary, I think a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Oh, man. Well, it has been quite a journey, I'll tell you. And the whole reason I ended up writing a book, because I didn't think that the world needed another book, and I'm not sure that it does. But a little over 2 years ago, before I started writing it 2 years ago in August, a CEO that I was coaching and had coached in the past, she'd been on our podcast called the Anything But Typical Podcast, and she's a friend, and she had 10,000 W-2 employees at the time. She now has 12,000. Her name is Tana Green. And she said, Gary, I don't know what I'm doing, kind of ashamedly. And I said, are you kidding me? I mean, good grief. You're amazingly successful. She's just got everything going for her. And I said, why would you say that, Tana? And she said, I only have a 2-year secretarial degree. Carrying that around. And boy, I know that feeling because I carried it around for a long freaking time that I was a college dropout. I had 2 years of college. And so I said, Tana, you run circles around pretty much every CEO that I know that's got advanced degrees. She is really a purpose-driven, very good CEO. And it was shortly thereafter that I realized, man, pretty much every CEO that has dropped their guard and confided in me that I've either coached or worked alongside or worked for, not very many of them that I worked for actually dropped their guard. A few, but I've worked with a lot, and pretty much all of them, except for the narcissists and sociopaths,
Right.
they didn't have this issue.
That's right. That's right.
Everybody else had these same sort of feelings, like I'm in over my head. I'm not that great. I just got lucky. If people just knew this or that about me, these feelings of just deep insecurity when they're married with such tremendous accomplishment, which is such a mind bender. And I realized, I had never even heard imposter syndrome until a few years ago. And I thought, as a kid, I was raised, not because I was raised this way, I just was this way. Perfectionist. I saw the wrong in everything. I saw and it's great. It's a superpower in some ways because that's helped me do turnarounds of companies and all that. I can see the broken stuff fast and I can figure out how to deal with it. But at some point it can become a torment and it can weaken you dramatically. And that's certainly the case what happened for me. So that's a little bit about the book. It has some of my story kind of in the back, but it has 7 weapons that I've kind of learned the hard way. I wish I would have done this, 30 years ago. It would have saved me a lot of pain. But maybe here's what I know: pain can produce humility if you pay attention, and it certainly ground me into some dust at times, which is good, because when I did my first turnaround, I didn't think that I was good enough. I didn't, think I was qualified, and I certainly wasn't qualified, but we did it. But I still always felt less than. And I'm hoping that some of these things that I've learned actually benefit somebody else so that they don't have to go through the same inner torment, that feeling, less than. I can't share this piece about me with anybody else because they'll reject me.
Okay, good intro. We also want to welcome Rick Melton. Rick joining us from Kentucky. And then, of course, our friend Eunice. Always glad to hear from Eunice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, another person from Africa. So let's see what Eunice has to say. She says, hi, some people say imposter syndrome is something you have to embrace and move through. I don't think this is true. I think finding the core level belief that gives you that is a great mindset shift. Can imposter syndrome be developed? Thoughts?
Oh, Eunice, she has such great questions.
She does.
Like one
Very
of the things
insightful.
I like about, I just love seeing Eunice's perspective. I love reading her content. She has such very thoughtful responses. And so that's been really wonderful. Listen, I don't know if it can be developed or not. Probably, Google it because there's a lot of information out there. It's funny because I feel like I'm learning too. And it probably can be developed. I read something this morning where somebody said, imposter syndrome is a result of being subjected to narcissists. Well, I can tell you this. My parents were not narcissistic at all. And I think my mom, who's 88, still wonders, well, gosh, what did we do? What did we do? Listen, I was the oldest child. I don't know why, but perfectionism is a pretty nasty thing. And it was funny, and it drove me, that's for sure. It drove me to achieve certain things in spite of being very inept in a lot of areas, like playing baseball. I was among the worst. So, and yet that's what kids did in Kansas. So that did not work out too well,
Right.
And some of that, and I think some of it was my dad had one leg. He lost a leg to polio when he was 17. And so the stares of people, man, I'll tell you what, that was tough from the time I was a little kid walking by my dad and walking slowly, I'll say, watching people stare at this man dragging a leg was difficult. And so I think that's why I longed. My prayer for such a long time was, Lord, I just want to be normal. I was in pursuit of normal. Well, there is no such thing as normal other than a setting on a dryer. I believe that to my core. Like, we were all created anything but typical. We were all created to be unique, but I just did not believe that. I was trying to chase whatever the television ads were saying was normal. That's a trap.
Yes, definitely. Well, and I think Eunice is asking if we have to embrace the imposter aspect of it to get through it. And I don't think we necessarily have to embrace it. We have to acknowledge it, I would say. And I think that's part of the problem is a lot of people deny that it even exists.
Yeah.
And rather own it. But I think what she's going to is if we can recognize our value and begin to combat it with the fact that we have great value, regardless of whether we meet the norms or measure up or whatever. And I think she's on to something there that.
Yeah, I do too.
And then welcome Andrea. And let's see. Andrea has a comment. It would be wonderful to learn vicariously through other, except we only really learn when we make mistakes. I see that in my daughter, who has no interest in learning from my mistakes. She wants to learn from her own. Go ahead, Gary. I know from your reaction you got a thought on that one.
Oh, I just think it's funny. Yeah, I do. I'm with you. Hopefully what we can do is keep people from having life-altering lessons in a bad way, keeping them from real danger and maim and harm and, even worse. But yeah, I get it. And perhaps that's why I had to go through some of the stuff I went through because, I just had to learn that way. So I think that's really good. But yeah, no, and I would also echo and just finish up with Eunice's initial thought, which was, do we have to embrace it? I like your nuance, Kevin, which is we have to acknowledge it, but I'm not sure that we have to embrace it as our friend because, quite frankly, that incessant voice chirping in our ear, you're not good enough, blah, blah, blah. I want to just yank that guy off the stage and bind him and shut him up. And that's why I call it silence the imposter. I don't want to put up with the imposter.
That we have enough other voices that we have to deal with. Let's not deal with any extras.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So Johan has a comment or question. Says, Gary, my friend, do you think you can overcome imposter syndrome, or do you just learn to deal with it better and faster when it raises its voice?
Hey, Johan. A year ago, he was staying at my house in the United States, and we went for a hike this last weekend, as a matter of fact. So, Johan, so good to see you, man. So overcoming imposter syndrome, like, I guess, does that mean like once and for all? I think it's like anything else of the enemy. The enemy has not been silenced once and for all yet. I believe that day is coming. But until then, I don't have to embrace the enemy. I just have to recognize the enemy. And so I am not embracing imposter syndrome. I'm going to recognize it. And just because, so, here's a great example. Tana Green, who I talk about, I only mention two people in the book by name. I don't mention any company names on purpose. It just really didn't add to the story anyway. But Tana Green and Ben McDonald, my co-host on the podcast, besides just the acknowledgments in the front. But Tana wrote this book called Creating a World of Difference. And it's a beautiful book, man. I mean, it's really a beautiful book. It's well designed. It's short, but it's really good. She put a spotlight on, weapon number 3 is because of Tana Green. Weapon number 3 is do this, shine a light on it, right? And that takes tremendous courage. There's a reason I'm wearing this t-shirt, because it takes tremendous courage to admit and bring to the light the stuff that we don't want anybody to know. Well, hey, nobody needs to know my dirty laundry. Maybe that's true. But if we are cowering in the corner in shame and we're dragging something with us through life because we're ashamed of it or whatever, it's so counterintuitive and it seems extremely masochistic, and I am not a masochist. But man, dragging that thing out of the shadows into the light is freeing. And what she did with this book is she put a spotlight on the stuff that she had been carrying silently in the shadows with shame. She had a child at age 15 out of wedlock. Not something you want to talk about here in the South. Exposed right here. She has the child. Thank the Lord. I'm glad she did. She gets married to the guy, tries to do the right thing. He ends up beating her up, putting her in the hospital, and abandoning her and the baby. Well, then she goes back to high school 2 years later. She doesn't want to do a GED, which is, I used to administer GED tests at a truck stop. My dad started the first GED program for over-the-road truckers, which is really super cool. So my senior year in high school, I was administering GED tests to truckers, which was really cool. But she didn't want to do that. She wanted to go back. So that's kind of humbling. You're going back and graduating with people that were, you should have been a senior and they were sophomores. Okay, so she goes back, graduates. She can't afford to go to college besides a secretarial school. Well, she kept all that stuff hidden from the ladies she was hobnobbing around with the Women's Professional Organization, WPO. But she finally put a spotlight on it. And she said, Gary, I said, what was that like? Because that's pretty bold. A lot of people be like, well, that's in my past. I don't need to talk about it. And you don't, unless it's dragging you down. Then I kind of think, do the counterintuitive thing and just blow it out of the water. Admit it. And that's what she did. And she said, Gary, it set me free and it set a whole bunch of people free. Wow. Now, okay, great. So she does that. And it's years later that she goes, Gary, I don't know what I'm doing. It wasn't done once and for all. We all have this. And I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast about a year ago, and Hugh Jackman was being interviewed. And Hugh Jackman, man, his accomplishments are pretty amazing. And I don't really like lifting up Hollywood stars or whatever, but he has some pretty amazing accomplishments. And I'm listening to it with Adam Boatsman, business partner of mine, and we're driving from Florida back to North Carolina, and this interview is going on, and Hugh Jackman says, "Man, I got to tell you, I was getting really nervous." I'm like, "Who am I to be on Tim Ferriss's podcast?" You know, and I said, "Adam, I mean, Tim Ferriss has a great podcast, no getting around it, yeah,
Right.
but Hugh Jackman is a little bit more famous." Probably a lot more. And, you know, his accomplishments are very different. All right. I'll just put it that way. I said, that's imposter syndrome, man. Hugh Jackman. Right.
Yeah.
I think we can all do that because when we esteem somebody else, and it's good to honor other people, but when we put them on a pedestal and we do oh, wow, they know all of this stuff. And we think that we know this much, but we think everybody else knows that much, we're in trouble. And that's when we give the imposter syndrome, we give it, you know, center stage, spotlights on it. Woo, you know, the imposter is having a day.
Well, and Jeremy has a comment here. He says, acknowledge, accept, as in take action, then work towards keeping authentic. It's always useful in preventing imposter syndrome.
Yes, and amen to that, Jeremy. I believe that too.
Yeah, it's and part of, in fact, I have to go on. Johan makes a further comment, and I want to kind of dig into this one. He says, so the truth will set you free. Amen. And, you know, in some circles that might be considered a little cliche, but they're so powerful much power in what he says. And I think that's part of what we have to address with imposter syndrome is the untruth that we rent space in our head to that we have to overcome by exposing the untruth of it. One of the things that you've mentioned that you struggled with, and I think this is a real indicator of a very big cultural problem, and that is our value based on education. We have, unfortunately, and I don't think this is just a U.S. problem. I think this is all over, that we have elevated academic accomplishment to a level of putting our value in it to a point that it's really sad, because I know a lot of people struggle with that. I know, I shared on our last time together that I do not have a bachelor's degree either. I came within 2 classes of completing, but when you run in circles like education and things like I do, people make certain assumptions, but the reality is we have put the wrong value on the wrong things as to what makes us real and valued. So I know you've got some different ways to approach that you talk about in the book. So what are some of the things you would suggest to expose the untruth and begin to entertain the truth?
Well, before I do that, I'm going to talk about a guy that reached out to me from Toronto, because he addresses this. And so he says, hey, I devoured your book in 4.25 hours. I couldn't put it down. it spoke to me so profoundly. And he talks like we had a number of things that were kind of in common. He said, I achieved various college diplomas, but did not have a university degree. So like you, thinking an MBA would help me catch up and maybe leapfrog my time and my peers, I went back to school at 46 and earned an MBA. But it hasn't done anything resembling what I hoped it might. Yeah. So I think there are a number of weapons that kind of deal with this. The first weapon is realize you're not alone. When we allow ourselves to get into an isolation chamber and feel like we're the only ones, oh gosh, I'm the only one. And it happens so easily on many, many things. And it's usually around stuff that we're embarrassed by. Well, that's a problem. Weapon number 3 is the shine a light on it, which is, hey, let's just drag it out of the shadows and bring it into the open and address it. And this notion of comparing ourselves with others is just such a stinking trap. And yes. A friend of mine, Davin Savagno, who is in charge of this thing called the Purpose Summit, he doesn't think that it's comparison as much, but he refines it even further and says it's envy, which I think that's true. But I do know this, when we're just constantly judging ourselves against each other or this other standard, I really think it's a bad thing. I like competition. It's a lot of fun, but it can get into a danger zone fast, and it can become obsessive. It can drive us. So I think that feeling of, and really the 6th weapon, which is embrace the anything but typical in yourself and others. That one's really a powerful one too, because it's like, hey, just celebrate their uniqueness. Now, if you feel like you really need to go back to school to get some proficiency in an area, great. But I think we have to always go back to the Simon Sinek, why? What's our why? That takes courage too. I know when I was at Bank of America, and part of the whole degree thing for me especially was very prevalent there. Here I am, a college dropout. You have to, like, it's all disclosed on your application, but they had already hired me. Like, they targeted me. They sought me out. But you still got to you go through your fingerprinting and all that, no problem. But you have gaps of employment, and you have to talk about where's your last, degree completed. I have to do a little asterisk there. Big asterisk, I only finished 2 years. Well, that's very humbling and felt naked. When I said that to the boss that hired me, I said, why would you hire me? Look at this. This is embarrassing. I mean, I really wanted to cry and slink out of that room. And she said, Gary, I'm not really good at a lot of things, but one thing I'm really good at is hiring. And she said, I've checked you out 6 ways to Sunday, and I found all kinds of people that we have in common. LinkedIn wasn't prevalent. It wasn't even invented yet. This is in 1995. But she said, I look for people that have been kicked in the teeth a couple times and keep running back. And she said, at one point she said, I like humble, hungry street fighters. Oh, well, that gave me, some confidence. But here's the deal. I had people on my team, my work team, that were Yale graduates. I had people that reported to me that were Northwestern MBAs. And my job was master's preferred, bachelor's required. And yet I knew, and so did my boss, and so did the head of HR, but that was about it. Hey, this SVP doesn't even have a college degree. So I had to keep that quiet. And whenever people were talking about their degrees and their alma maters and blah, 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 I did this. Silence, right? And
yeah,
and part of it is shame, like, oh, I don't want to be rejected. Now, would those people have rejected me? They probably would have went, what? And so I suppose there's a time and a place, but man, it was an albatross that I just hung around my neck, carried it too stinking long.
well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned something earlier that is a common thought that we've grown up with, is we shouldn't air our dirty laundry. And I appreciate that there is a right place and a way and time, but I think what we have done is taken that to an extreme, and rather than weapon number 3, exposing the light on ourselves that we are hiding. And as a result of not willing to shed the light on ourselves, that leads to a lot of other people going, I'm the only one.
Yeah.
And by shining the light on our lives and being open and vulnerable, it helps others to be able to say, oh, I'm really not alone in this, and begin to consider that there is other ways than living as an imposter in our own mind. And so I really like the weapons you share in the book and how they really do make a difference for us. And we've got to get to a point where we recognize the untruth, but the other side is we've also got to figure out where do we find what is true, which is a big challenge. So let's see, we've got a couple of comments here. Let's see, Andrea makes a comment that that is so good. We often put others on pedestals. Folks, pedestals are dangerous for any of us, easily fallen off of.
People, places, and things are uniquely designed to draw us closer to Jesus. That's what I believe. I heard that from an evangelist like 40 years ago. And I thought, the older I get, the more we will all fail. We will all, we are all still people with feet of clay, and it's good to have, we weren't meant to walk alone, but we weren't meant to put somebody else or ourselves on the throne that we don't deserve, quite frankly. And when we do, watch out.
Well, it's not good for us, or it's not good for them.
No.
As we've read through history. Another comment from Andrea is, we're all cogs in a wheel together. We can be great, but in isolation, we can flounder. Definitely got to the key of walking together and recognizing, I like that you talk about anything but typical, because we are all very unique, but we share some common. And one of the commons that we share is part of our purpose, universal design for us, is we're here to help each other. And if we're not doing that, we're missing a huge part of our purpose. And so we've got to be ready and willing to work together with each other. And that means letting other people know that we aren't perfect. We shouldn't be on pedestals. So your thoughts on being cogs in the wheel?
Well, one thing that Andrea said here that I think is, it just evoked this image in my mind. So my uncle, and I don't talk about this in the book, but my uncle raised championship Suffolk sheep that were world famous in Heston, Kansas, but like he was a shepherd. And so as a kid at the Kansas State Fair, I would also show his sheep. I was a city kid, city, 16,000 people in a railroad town, but I was the city kid. So I show these sheep. And one thing that I knew is coyotes or wolves, but we had coyotes there in Kansas. What they love to do is they will separate one sheep from the rest of the herd. And when one is separated, they're easy prey. And if you've watched any like National Geographic or any things like that with what happens in Africa, that's exactly what the wildebeest do, etc. They go for the one. They separate it. And I think that's a really powerful picture for us, because I think the imposter is like a wolf. It's ravenous. It's not ever satisfied. And, so that's my word picture for that. So I could not agree with you more. And just think about what I want you to think about is a time that you've gone through that was lonely, dark, frightening, etc. And I want you to think about anybody that may have come alongside you, picked up the phone to just see how you're doing, or had come over to just sit by you. They couldn't change your situation, but the fact that they were there, think about what that meant to you. That's a very powerful thing, especially when they couldn't do anything. They couldn't rescue you. They couldn't change anything, but just knowing you weren't alone. Super powerful.
Yeah. Let's see. We got a comment from Johan. It says, you can only find your purpose in life when you have the courage to surrender to God. Walk with an attitude of obedience. There is no imposter on the path God created for you to walk on. You only have today. You're worth it, and make it count. And, one of the things that I talk about on this podcast is that, and I remind people that we're made up of three parts. Got a body, got a soul, got a spirit. And if we're going to be healthy, we've got to nurture all three. And, in a lot of cultures, the spirit is at best given very little attention, and at worst completely ignored. And what Johan's talking about is dealing with spiritual things in our life and how necessary that is. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So I was raised as a designer. I mean, I wasn't raised, but I was drawn as a kid, and then I went into architecture and then switched over to design. And this was a few years back, but I was walking and we had these sweet gum balls, which are round about this size, and they are spiky. They look like the COVID spike, and they hurt, man. If you walk on them barefoot, I'm telling you, they hurt. But I was looking at that and I thought, man, that thing is really beautifully designed. Yeah. Now my foot doesn't appreciate stepping on it any more than a sandbird. But, it's beautifully designed. And I thought, wait a minute, there's nothing in this world that is random. There's nothing. Listen to the uniqueness of the birds, look at their unique things. And if you ever get Merlin, which is a Cornell Labs free app that you can play on your iPhone or whatever your phone is, and it'll identify the bird and it'll show you a picture of it, which is really cool. And you start just realizing, wow, the creativity our creator has is just amazing. I mean, I'm in awe of this. Well, as a designer, I knew that when I was doing, whether it's a television commercial or a newspaper ad, and I had a cockatiel at the time, I always knew that these newspaper ads, I worked so meticulously on everything. Like it wasn't by chance. I didn't just throw some, random fonts up there and some colors and some pictures and just like, hey, should be good. It was not random. It was on purpose. It was by design. And yet the shelf life was extremely short. It was going to be birdcage liner under Rocky, and yeah, Rocky was his name. And so I thought, if I'm that meticulous about something that really doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter. Look at the intentionality behind all of this. And so we can choose to embrace it and live in wonder, where we're like, wow, or we can just buck against it, as I did for a while in my earlier part of my life. Want to ignore that. Well, good luck with that. I just look at how we were designed, and you can embrace that or not. I'm not here to proselytize. I'm just here to say, here's my truth. Here's what I believe. And I'm just in awe. And that's where this whole, anything but typical really comes from, I believe, because here's another little fun fact, and it's not in the book. I dated 3 sets of twins before I met my wife, 2 identical and 1 fraternal.
Wow.
That's it. Those were the only people that I dated, which is funny. But none of them, the identicals, did not have the same thumbprint. As identical as they were, their thumbprint was different and unique. And I'm like, do you think that was just by random coincidence? Oh, hey, Gary, let's get this design and let's just type and images up there and see what happens. No, I don't believe that at all. And so I just think, wow, Andrea, I love what she says. I look at the colors you use to paint our wildlife in Australia. Oh, but man, I've seen some amazing stuff there. And I think, man, he had fun there. Yes.
Yeah, we have lots of evidence that God's got a sense of humor, no doubt.
Oh, man. I mean, some of these crazy birds, like what I love watching, there's a National Geographic, I think it was National Geographic. The photography is unbelievable. And I think it's, oh gosh, who is the narrator? Oh gosh, his name is escaping me right now. He's been around for a long time, but nonetheless, just seeing these unique birds and some of their dances, and it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating to me. But yeah, I totally agree. Australia has some. Rena, I think it's Rena, posts some amazing photos of what's going on in Australia, and just like, wow, I'd love to see that sometime.
Well, one of the things I enjoy about our friend Eunice is she will post some very unique animals and birds and things that are really remarkable. And it gives insight into the fact that there is a non-typical. And, so, let's see here. Rick makes a comment, and it's again goes to part of what we're talking about and understanding where we get the imposter syndrome. It says degrees are only as good as the person holding the degree. Like a licensed electrician, I've seen a few that weren't very good off paper. And
yes,
we've known off paper people, right?
Oh yeah. And it's true in every industry. I mean,
sure.
We run into it all the time in the CPA world. And I'm not, here's another funny thing. I'm the only non-CPA partner in our firm, and I'm the only one in the entire firm without a degree. And I think it is what it is. But,
right.
it wouldn't have been all that long ago. I couldn't say any of this stuff, much less laughed about it. Now, you got to be good at what you do. And I'm good at what I do. There's certain things I'm really good at. I don't want to be doing your tax returns. You don't want me to be doing your tax returns. Let me do what I'm good at doing.
Yeah.
And let our other people. That is true diversity, in my opinion. I believe in this DEI in concept, but we've made it quota systems. And I think that's dangerous. I think that's super dangerous. But if you really look at the best and highest functioning teams, they are not a whole bunch of automatons and robots that are clones of one another in an echo chamber. Not at all. There is true diversity of thought, perspective, and looking at things. And if you are bound by a common purpose, hey, we got this mission to accomplish. That's the team that's going to run circles around everybody else. If you truly have that diversity of thought, and we are very, very intentional about that at our firm. So weapon number 2 is called Thrive Wither, and it's a simple T chart. It'll take you 30 minutes to do it if you want to do it. It's just split a piece of paper in half. On the left side at the top, write Thrive, and on the right side, write Wither. It's not strengths, weaknesses. Put the stuff that makes you come alive. And yeah, you'll have some strengths in there for sure. But on the weaknesses side, on the Wither side, many, many times there are people, like, when you are honest about it, your strengths are in that Wither column. Maybe you went to school to become an accountant because your mom and dad said you're either a CPA, a lawyer, or a fireman, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or a doctor. Okay, I'll do that. I guess I'm good with numbers. So they become proficient at it. And I worked with a guy that was an amazing illustrator, phenomenal illustrator, but that was the path he went down. Oh, I'll be a CPA. Worked at Cessna Aircraft in their accounting department, was good at it, hated it. Hated it. And it wasn't until he started paying attention to what made him come alive that he completely ditched accounting and went into design and illustration. And one of the finest illustrators I've ever worked with in my life. And I've worked with some amazing ones, but that was the case. And when we truly find what makes us come alive, we spend less time in our Wither column. And when we do that, the imposter starts getting quieter because we're just too busy having fun doing what we do. And then when you find other people around you, take them through the same thing. That's what we do. And we really try to custom fit our roles to that person. Yeah, we have a role that needs to be done. And this is the role. But on that team, we really look across that team and we have them do Thrive Wither, and we start horse trading certain responsibilities so that we've got somebody that really is good. I mean, think about Dennis Rodman. He wasn't that great of a shooter, but man, that dude could rebound like nobody's business. Well, that was a key element for the Bulls to keep their dynasty rolling. It wasn't just all Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan.
Different
Michael Jackson is amazing too.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just Michael Jordan. As good as he was, he had a team. He had Scottie Pippen. He had, he had these guys, but there was a diverse skill set. And that's what I encourage anybody to look at. Like, surround yourself with people similar heartbeat, but not in the same echo chamber, chattering the same talking points. And that's where I think our world has gotten really dangerous, quite frankly, because we have polarized into echo chambers that unless you are parroting the same junk in this echo chamber, or maybe even truths, but we stop being able to listen to one another. Then all of a sudden, and look at who's getting rich in that. the media, and defense contractors.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
the media
Well,
and defense contractors.
I had something popped into my head, maybe a new mantra, and that is to look at design over degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And focus on finding our unique design. And when we can operate in our design, in our thrive,
Yeah.
then we can be much better. And it doesn't mean to indicate that degrees don't have a place. I think any learning in any form has a place, but we've elevated it to a place that it's very unhealthy, and it's causing what you're talking about. Same voices in these echo chambers, rather than okay, I am. One of my strengths, for example, is I know how to analyze and understand a problem, especially with mechanical, electrical, electronic things. And if I go in and I'm operating freely, I don't necessarily always bring out the book answer. I use my experience, I use my instincts, or gut, or whatever word you like to put there. I think that's part of this, the spiritual, the non-tangible component that we have to grow in to be effective in our design and our purpose. But when I can do that, those around me are better served. I function at a better level, and because of the amount of satisfaction, then it helps me not to be focused in on the things that I wither in, because for me, they lose their importance. And so let's see here, watching our time. We've got some more comments. Johan makes comment, and when you were talking about the sheep, that we should never isolate, withdraw ourselves when the imposter starts to raise its voice. I always think it interesting looking at your book cover. You've got the theatrical mask. Tell us about, what is your thought? There you go. How does the mask work?
Got my glasses. Yeah. When I created this image, I went through a number of things that I was messing around with, and I just think it's so cool. I did that on my phone. Like I shot the half of me here in here, and then, but this theatrical, the anonymous mask, that just was so powerful for me because it's so easy and, to hide behind a mask. And a guy that started F3, which is a military workout thing, and it's traveled all over the world now. He was a special forces guy here in Charlotte, but he called it sad clown. He was a sad clown, face happy but sad inside. And this, these masks, it's just so easy, plastic fantastic, yeah, how are you doing? Great. And I think, we have to rip that thing off. And it can be scary because that can become our identity. I love, like, I started a drum line when I was on the board of a pro soccer team. So it was a USL2 team up in Cleveland, Ohio. And I got these green and white rocker wigs, like spiky wigs. They're just hilarious. And I got all these people to do it with me, because it's not fun to do it by yourself, because then you're free. If you get at least one other person, it's a lot of fun.
That's right.
But I always thought, man, wouldn't the best job be to be the Philly fanatic? He is so funny but you can be completely uninhibited in a wig or with a mask. but at the same time, it's really, like, just peel it off and just be who you are anyway. Like, you don't have to have the mask. You don't have to have the Philly fanatic costume to be who you are and uninhibited. Be who you are and embrace it, versus hide behind it.
Well, one of the things you just said, I think, is powerful. And that is, and this goes to isolation. If we feel like we're the only one, our thought of ourselves is we're a freak. And nobody wants to be a freak. And when we can find others that have a similar wig, a similar whatever, then we can begin to say, okay, I'm not a freak. I am unique, and that's okay. And when we can begin to do that, then we can go from survival to thrive. And that's what I think is missing so much in our culture. Everyone is strictly surviving, and they're doing it because you're inside, they're defeated. They're not doing what they are designed to do or living their purpose. And the whole time feeling like a freak.
Yeah.
And, to me, there's a lot of freedom in not having to do that. One of the things that I've had on my journey that I've had to do is get to a point that where I gain or recognize my value has changed, and realizing that my value, because growing up, especially, in American culture, you're only as good as what you do. And I get that. I appreciate it. But at the end of the day, our value has been established, and we have had that taken away from us because we have questioned creation and our creator and spiritual things. Lots of different things have undermined that. But when we do recognize that as a human being created by an intelligent designer with purpose, and can and really recognize that and embrace that, then we can live our value, and we aren't battling to establish our value at that point. We are living it. And so just such a key thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm
Great
not
point.
sure, Gary, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yikes. Okay. On my end, we look
I'm
frozen, but so you got audio with me.
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Okay. On my end, the screen's frozen, so I didn't know. And so one thing that I would like to share, I'm going to give you closing time, and that is I'm recently co-authored on a book, and it's 17 of us men talking about our journey into manhood. And, if you want to find a place where you can see other people that have had to, that are willing to tell you and take off the mask, this book is something that will help you to be able to see those stories and understand that we're not alone. We aren't. There are no freaks out there. Now we make some bad choices that make us live in a challenged way, but there are no freaks. So Gary, wrap up with us, and be sure and tell people how to get the book, how to reach out to you, and so on.
All right, cool. Well, if you're on here, you're probably on LinkedIn, so just connect with me. And if we're not connected, send me a message. I have probably over 1,000 people that are in the queue that, like, I don't know that, and I've hit my limit. So you can also find me at GaryDFrey.com. I'm also on Instagram. I don't have that many followers on that, but and you can get the book. I would appreciate it. It'd be great. It's on Amazon. Silence the Imposter, $14.95, and it's only on audiobook, which is $9.95, I think, and then $14.95 for the paperback. And it's not that long. I mean, it's 160 some pages, so it's you'll get through it in a couple hours, or if you're really taking notes. And I am going to do an audiobook in a couple months, probably. I've got to, fork over the money for that too. But nonetheless, for anybody that likes listening to audio, it will be coming, but it's not available yet.
I'm checking my video here. Big thing. Probably a blessing that people don't have to look at my face.
No, that's not true.
So
yeah, your audio is still good.
Oh, Gary, I appreciate you coming on, and each time we finish, I'm thinking we got a lot more we could talk about, and I think so. The door's always open, and if you've got time, love to have you on, because I know you have walked through a lot. And when we walk through a lot and do it with some intentionality, that's where we begin to get wisdom. And so, so anytime the door's open, love to have you on the show. And
let's do it again. Do it again.
Definitely. So, well, everyone, thanks for being here today on either LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, and look forward to seeing you back again, the audience back again on Monday at 8:00. We're here every week pretty much. So thanks. Appreciate all the good comments and look forward to seeking and finding wisdom together. God bless. Take care. And we will catch up with you next time. Take care. Bye.
See y'all.